numbers earlier. Local authorities built a little over 1,000 homes last year, which is an awful lot more than they built in previous ones. Approved housing bodies built 450. In contrast to that, there were 18,000 new housing assistance payment tenancies set up. That's 50 per day of subsidised tenancies. So that's a very useful measure to show how many working couples are entering into rental distress and are finding it hard to meet the rents. HAP this year is projected to be another 17,000. Now, this is all adding up. When we talk about rebuilding Ireland not working, I always shake my head, and it actually is working really well, because the target in rebuilding Ireland for HAP is 87,500 tenancies by 2 years' time. So it's knocking the ball out of the park when it comes to rent assistance. And the bill this year, we've reached a milestone because of the 6, I just showed them the bill there, the 6 different types of rent assistance, including homeless, hubs, HAP, rent assistance. There's about 115,000 assistant tenancies in the state, 1 in 3. And the bill exceeded €1 billion for the first time. So that's 1.05 billion we're spending this year to the private sector landlords for assisted rentals. Now, Deeper did a report last year in July, and they projected that this will increase by 2023 to 1.7 billion a year, which is the equivalent of 1 children's hospital or just spending on rent assistance. That's a lot of dough. Now, meanwhile, we've got 120,000 people on housing waiting lists. There's 40,000 in Dublin. So in terms of the other critical sector that's putting pressure on the grind of the middle is non-household purchases, which were in the media recently. 2 weeks ago we heard about the cuckoo funds coming in, the evil, nasty foreign funds taking our houses and taking our women and, you know, eating our grub and all this sort of stuff, right? But in actual fact, the interesting thing is when you drill into the figures, the biggest cuckoo of all is the state. Because according to Rebuilding Ireland, last year the state, local authorities and approved housing bodies purchased 2,100 dwellings, and there's a further 841 Part 5 social dwellings were purchased or rented from private developers. So that's actually 1 in 4 of all new private dwellings purchased last year were purchased by the state, 2,900. Now the price that was paid for that was less than 240,000, which is the affordable. You remember the red line? So the state is going in, competing with first-time buyers for the cheap houses below that number. While at the same time last year, NAMA funded 2,500 severely unaffordable homes. And they were built, and I think something like the median price there is over €400,000. And 1 in 5 of those is purchased by a fund in a block purchase. So we have the state itself is actually getting, it's almost like 2 rocks, and it's taking that middle zone of people who earn over 35,000, can't qualify for social housing supports, and if they earn 75, they still can't afford to buy a house, and they're grinding the middle of these two. On the one hand, they're competing with them for cheaper houses all across the country, and on the other, they're actually funding severely unaffordable homes for potential overseas workers or high earners who earn about 150 grand. So the sort of squeeze middle is in this pincer movement. In Dublin, the state purchased, now these numbers are very low, but of course they're reflective of very low output. Local authorities purchased 197 and approved housing bodies purchased 451 turnkey homes. But the level of state purchases has doubled in a year. So the state, the name of the game for the state is, the way they classify new social houses, when you hear it, when we hear the announcements from the department, to be 4,000 or 5,000, is they have they've misrepresented these new homes that are purchased off developers, off the plans, as new social housing builds. They're private sector homes that are just bought and blocked by the state. 1 in 5. Now, in terms of affordability, you've heard it already, 30% of households earn between 35,000 and 73,000 euros. The affordable price is 3.5 times income, 245. Median first-time buyer price is 370. In Dublin, the average new home price is 446. Cllr is actually far worse than anywhere else. In Cllr, the affordability crisis is at its most acute. And I remember meeting a friend of mine recently, and he said, "Oh, well, we're fine, it hasn't really hit us. It's, you know, the price didn't really hit us as bad as anywhere else." We're actually worse than anywhere because if the average home price here is 570,000 and you have 2 kids, you need to have a backer of an equity release to get them to buy one bed nearly. I mean, the pavilion down at Cllr now, one bed is selling for 375,000 euros used. So, you know, Cllr, Tumbleweed there, the 2 beds are selling for 480. Hines are doing Cherrywood, projected sales prices there are over half a million. So, you know, in terms of affordability, unless you're on a big salary, you are in serious trouble. But the good news is,
we get a discount.
The good news is, one more slide before I get to the good news. In terms of development land, another assumption here is we've no land, we need more zoned land, you know, give us the cheap land, we'll do it. Land is a real big problem. The land is a real problem, but we actually have an abundance of it. There's enough zoned development land in Ireland for 414,000 dwellings, right? In Dublin, there's enough zoned residential land for 114,000 dwellings. These are the state's own audits on it based on older density. Now, in terms of the state-controlled land, the state controls close to 20% of all of this in one form or another. Local authorities own enough land nationwide for about 48,000 dwellings, and NAMA debtors own enough land for close to 70,000 dwellings. So there's an enormous land bank there that the state controls directly. So it has absolute control on the land market. And the land market is going off the deep end at the moment, as we all read in the paper, because you have hot money rolling in abroad to it. So, you know, we've seen local authorities and group housing bodies building 1,000 units last year, NAMA funding 2,500, and yet between them, I think they have enough land for about 112,000 dwellings. So really low outputs, despite having the capacity there. So in terms of your local authority development land, it gets even more interesting because, you know, I've been in talks, and Brendan Kenny from Dublin City Council has come in and said, we've no land, we're going to run out of land in 4 years. You know, Dublin City Council has 112 hectares of zoned land. Poolbeg, the density there is 238 units per hectare. So even if it was half that density, you're looking at Dublin City Council on its own having a capacity for about 14,000 dwellings on its own. So, and we know when you add in, like Darragh down doesn't have that amount of land at all. It still has quite a bit of land, but it doesn't have anything like that. And I think between all the 4 Dublin local authorities, there's enough land there for about 45 or 48,000 dwellings. So we have a series, the state owns a series amount of land. Now that's before you get into IDA, Cllr, CIE, any other state bodies. So we have an enormous amount of land out there. And I mean, when you go into town, next time you're going in, count the number of vacant sites you see. Right? Just remember this one thing. And when you get to 4, just think that the state controls 3 of those that you see. The state controls 75%, 3 and 4 every vacant site in town. And it's a 50-50 in terms of ownership between NAMA-controlled debtors and the state. So we own an awful lot of it. In terms of, sorry, I'll go back to the other slide. So, I mean, one of the critical components that we have in affordable housing, Bill will talk to you about it, is the land price. He's getting, in partnership with Dublin City Council, end users are getting, he's able to build A2 rated 3-bed homes for 219,000 euros including that. The subsidy there is the end user gets to buy the site for 1,000 euros. Now they're valued at 16, they're not 50, they're 16,000 euros in Ballymun. So the state is subventing the site price by 15. Also, the lads aren't paying development contributions and planning levies, which is 10 grand. So the state is subventing that purchase by 25. But out of the 219, 26,000 is VAT. So the state's getting back 26. So it's actually costing the state nothing. So they're effectively getting Bill to come in. They write a letter to say, I'm giving you a license to build on the site. Once they're happy with what Bill goes off, he gets his architect, his engineer, gets his planning permission, does all that. Privately financed, not one penny comes off the state coffers for it, and he sells those units to people not on the housing waiting list. They've, now I hope we get my numbers right, you can give me a kick if I'm not. They have a waiting list of 1,500, and they're the only private entity in Ireland building houses around County Dublin at this affordable level. They're the only gig in town, and they're doing about 34. They have a capacity for 1,000, and all